Ready? Because there's people coming.
Hi, I'm Justine.
And I'm Daryl.
And we're the Breakaway Bravehearts. And today we're in Tintagel Castle, said to be one of the most mystical and breathtaking places in Cornwall.
Nestled on the North Cornwall coast, this ancient site is steeped in historical myth and legend and modern-day tourist hype. Today we're going to explore the ruins of this legendary castle and uncover the stories that make it one of the most talked about destinations in the UK. We'd heard of Tintagel's beauty and of the links with King Arthur, so we wanted to see what the hype was all about. Ready? Because there's people coming. We'll take you through our day, rating the site in terms of social good, economic impact, accessibility, relationships between both tourists and locals, and of course sustainability.
We're starting our journey by walking from one of the many car parks in Tintagel or Trevena village. The population of the entire Tintagel parish, which includes the neighbouring villages of places which I struggle to pronounce, was recorded as being only 1,725 at the 2021 census. Yet the castle ruins, managed by English Heritage, can take up to 3,000 people in one day during the summer months.
We arrived fairly early in the day, and the crowds were already gathering. Walking through the town, we could see the enterprising locals had decided to make the most of the foot traffic the castle ruins draw in. On offer along the main road is King Arthur's Great Hall, an old post office boasting a view of 600 years of Cornish domestic life, a sampling of Cornish rock gin, and of course numerous gift stores, cafes and restaurants. But we followed the stream of visitors towards the cliffs and over the bridge to explore the castle ruins.
Tintagel Castle dates back to the 13th century when it was built by Richard, Earl of Cornwall, the brother of King Henry III. Although it was more of a symbolic site than a stronghold, its strategic location made it a powerful symbol of Richard's status.
Can you imagine it in its heyday, can't you? What a positioning.
However, what's come to set Tintagel apart from other medieval castles is its association with the legendary King Arthur.
According to legend, Tintagel is the birthplace of King Arthur. The story goes that King Arthur was conceived here when King Uther Pendragon, with the help of the wizard Merlin, used magic to win the love of the Queen Igraine.
Let me unpack that one for you in just a little more detail. The story was first told in 1138 by Geoffrey of Monmouth in his History of the Kings of Britain. The story goes that Uther Pendragon had a crush on the Duchess of Cornwall, Igraine, who was married to Duke Corlys of Cornwall. Uther was King of Britain at the time, and he was quite happy to use his power to publicly flirt with Igraine in front of her husband, provoking him into war so Uther could attack Cornwall. So Corlys tried to protect his wife by putting her in the town of Tintagel while he lured Uther's troops away into another place. Then Uther got his wizard Merlin to disguise him as Dolores so he could sneak into Tintagel. Igraine, thinking it was her husband, welcomed him, as a wife does. And so Arthur was conceived on the very night that Uther's troops were killing her real husband. So basically, Geoffrey of Monmouth decided that the best way to conceive a literary legend was through incredibly inappropriate deceit. It baffles me how the masses lapped this up. I mean, this is not okay.
And actually, no one seems to know exactly why Monmouth decided upon Tintagel as the site for this infamous deed to take place, although it can't be denied that the landscape definitely inspires such drama. On a clear day, you can see for miles along the dramatic Cornish coastline. It's easy to understand why this place has been a source of inspiration for poets, writers and artists for centuries. The tale of King Arthur is set sometime in the 5th and 6th centuries AD. From about AD 450 until about AD 650, Tintagel was actually a prosperous and highly significant site, closely involved in trade with the Mediterranean world. Archaeological evidence shows the island was covered with many small rectangular buildings. Many pieces of imported Mediterranean pottery, tableware, and glass have been found on both the mainland and the island.
However, after that, there seems to be a huge gap of nothingness. There's actually little evidence of anything happening from about the mid-7th century onwards for about 500 years. So around the time that Monmouth was writing his history, Tintagel was actually a place of ruins, left to the ravages of nature.
Although Geoffrey of Monmouth's work was not intended to be factual history, it was widely read and accepted as such in the medieval period. So much so that a royal Arthurian fanboy decided to buy himself a part in the legend. In May 1233, Richard, Earl of Cornwall, little brother of Henry III, swapped 3 of his manors for this isolated, rugged headland on the North Cornish coast. Then he built a castle here, with an outer bailey on the cliff and an inner ward with a great hall and chambers on the headland. Earl Richard was a literary man who would have wanted to associate himself with the legend of Arthur. By building a castle, he was playing on Arthur's status as a folk hero throughout Western Britain, and thereby endearing himself to the locals. It was a trick he passed on to his family, particularly his nephew, Edward I, who had a round table at Winchester made, and rebuilt the supposed tomb of Arthur and Guinevere at Glastonbury Abbey in Somerset.
However, Tintagel Castle was built on foundations as shaky as the legend that sparked it. Within a decade, the buildings were showing signs of instability, and by 1337, the castle was described as ruinous, the state you'll find it in today.
It's quite amazing. It seems like since circa 1240, it's had to go through quite a few renovations all the time. It's like things have had to be made adjusted due to collapse and erosion of steep cliffs and all those sort of things. So it's no wonder that we're here at ruins.
But while it physically declined, the myth actually grew and grew. Some started to claim that it was actually the birthplace of Arthur, then that Merlin trained the boy on the beach and in the cave below, and some even said that it was the legendary Camelot. In 1859, Alfred Lord Tennyson first published Idylls of the King, a series of poems based on the Arthurian legends, and these revived public interest in Arthur, and by extension, Tintagel. The Victorians, with their love of history and myth, embraced Tintagel as a site of pilgrimage, and the castle ruins, coupled with the dramatic scenery, provided the perfect backdrop for romanticized visions of Arthur's Camelot. Today, while it is simply ruins, it's still called a castle, and it's still owned by a prince, the Prince of Wales, in fact. However, since the mid-19th century, it's been used solely as a tourist destination, and it's managed by English Heritage.
A lot of time, effort and money has gone into upgrading the site for visitors while maintaining the ecosystem and biodiversity of this stunning landscape. The award-winning bridge, built in 2019, offers a spectacular view across the coastline. Dotted along the walk, which is at least 40 minutes long, are artistic references to the legend of King Arthur, like the beautifully crafted gallows statue standing on the cliff edge. You'll need to be patient if you want that Instagram shot, as this is one of the many popular photo stops along the route.
Another key location is Merlin's Cave. We searched expectantly for what we thought was a natural feature of the landscape, wondrously shaped in the likeness of the magical Merlin.
Do you think that's it? I have no idea. It looks facial, but it could be something further down. Is that Merlin in the wall there, or am I seeing things? I don't know.
I was utterly convinced that I had seen it in the shadows. Turns out we'd already passed it at the entrance, an artistic but artificial sculpture in the rock. Silly me.
I guess you fell for the hype.
Yeah, I did, and I have to admit I was a bit disappointed. Tintagel is undeniably a beautiful piece of the planet, and I almost feel like it was a shame to place so much emphasis on a legend with such a twisted storyline when the real hero here is nature.
I agree. It was the brilliant blue sky, the rugged coastline, and the glorious ocean that were the highlight of the day. But I did also enjoy learning a little bit more about life in the castle during its short heyday, which leads us on to the BB Stars review. And the first star, social good.
So I'm not sure what to work of this. Obviously this is probably something to do with a hamlet that was here before, or is it the castle? There's a little something here that maybe we can have a read.
There is written information in English dotted throughout the site. We found ourselves wishing for an audio guide, as this is something we have very much enjoyed at other English heritage sites. It turns out there is actually something akin to an audio guide, but it isn't made entirely obvious. You have to download it in advance from the Tintagel website, and it is part of a separate app called Bloomberg Connects. In fact, this app has audio guides to hundreds of sites around the world, so it's worth a look at. The majority of info on Tintagel can be found in the exhibition room through the gift shop. There is an interactive display that shows you the site over the centuries and information about the people who briefly lived there at different periods throughout time. There was also a table with rocks of archaeological interest, and if you're lucky, there might be a volunteer around available for you to speak to.
It's been a beautiful day. I would say of all my choices that I've had so far from English heritage, this has probably been the most disappointing for me.
Okay, why is that?
I'm guessing basically they haven't got an audio,
Yeah.
so when you go around you can sort of work it out, but maybe that's because of the amount of visitors they have here,
Yeah.
or maybe because the purpose of the visitors here, maybe they're just not here to see the history, but to enjoy the headlands and just have a picnic and enjoy the beach, of course. That would be my biggest one, is actually trying to know what was going on each time we go around there. Like, I know it's the ruins, reality, it's ruins. But it's kind of like a hidden ruins. There's very little to see. The oven, for example, spot the oven. Just having a little sign saying this was the oven would be useful if it were just a little inside, anything like that. Just because it says that they want to inspire, and I was more, I guess, the beauty of the surroundings is what made it for me today.
But other than that, the link between visitors and locals was not particularly close on the day we were there, simply because of the sheer number of visitors. I didn't feel like I got a chance to explore any cultural connections with the site, or new learning or perspectives. And we simply can't call it a unique destination or lesser known place. We were unable to talk to any locals about the impact of tourism on their daily life. Over-tourism has been a hot topic in Cornwall for a couple of years. A study by Visit Cornwall estimated that tourism contributes over £10 million annually to the local economy. This income is crucial in a region where traditional industries like fishing and agriculture are now in decline. But some say it's come at the cost of living for those that have made these little towns their home for generations. We'd love to hear your opinions on this debate. Where do you stand on the issue of over-tourism? How much is too much? And who's responsible for controlling it all?
We couldn't find any information about any volunteer activities that would suit tourists in this area. If you happen to know of any, please just let us know and comment below.
English Heritage is a registered charity who rely on membership fees, entrance fees, and the support of charitable trusts and foundations to help care for their sites and make them available to as many people as possible. In particular, they have benefited from over £50 million from the National Lottery Heritage Fund. To be honest, this is something that sits a little uncomfortably with Daryl and I, not being fans of the gambling industry. We just wish that such important cultural sites could be funded by more socially responsible means.
There is no doubt that English heritage investment in Tintagel Castle has brought economic benefit and employment opportunities to the local village and surrounding villages. There are plenty of inns, restaurants, shops, hotels and camping sites Some smaller operations run by locals, other larger chains and corporations.
Accessibility. The expansive site is fairly easy to walk, with the biggest hazard being the crowds. English Heritage do their best in each of their locations to accommodate for as many people as possible. However, they struggle in balancing the need to protect natural landscapes with accessibility needs. Tintagel wasn't designed for wheelchairs, and you'll need to be sure-footed to get up and down the stairwells and around the grounds. English Heritage have a web page dedicated to access support in each of their locations, where you can scroll through to find information about what's provided to support physical, audio, sight, and other needs.
They have a dedicated equality, diversity and inclusion team who have set up networks to listen to and represent voices such as ethnic diversity, LGBTQ+, gender-specific issues, faith and belief, age, disability, social equity, and neurodivergence. They are members of the Disability Confidence Scheme, the Stonewall Champions Programme, and the Business Disability Forum. The UK as a country scores 71 out of 100 in the Equaldex ranking, so there's a little bit of work to be done. We've popped the link in the description if you'd like any more information.
Underneath the cat. The last point on this star asks about the overall social perspective presented. We look at accessibility from a socio-political point of view. Was the site highly political, religious, or monocultural? And from this perspective, I have to say a yes on the monocultural. It definitely felt like there was a white English male stamp all over the place. Don't get me wrong, I have my own English white male, which I take with me everywhere. But I need more than his perspective on life. There has been some controversy in the community about the way English Heritage have used Tintagel, a part of Cornish Heritage, to promote English pop Arthuriana, a term I borrowed from Dr. Tamina Goska. Apologies if I pronounced that incorrectly. Dr. Goska's paper on the controversies around the use of Tintagel as a tourist destination asks questions such as, why is the indoor exhibition centre so small and the space devoted to the Cornish history of the site understated when the shop areas are so large? Is the occasional use of the Cornish language enough to signify its Cornish heritage? These are great questions, but my favourite, is the site being used as a cash cow and therefore privileging the undiscerning tourist over Cornish communities really made me curious. We're right in the stage of transitioning from being undiscerning tourists to informed social tourists, and we were pretty persuaded by her arguments, so we're not going to award the final point on this star. We agreed with her that the problems she found contravened the rights of the Cornish national minority to have a say in how their heritage is presented and used. We've popped a link to her article in the description, and as always, we welcome your comments.
And now for relationships. Point 1. Was it fun? We're giving it the transparent gold here. It was spectacular and the view was stunning, but it definitely hasn't been our favourite English heritage site to visit. From our perspective on the day, this was certainly one site in England where we felt crowded. It was difficult to really appreciate the beauty of the surroundings amidst the shuffle and bustle. Getting down to the beach was particularly tricky and in some parts a little hazardous simply because of the number of people using the singular stairwell. The number of visitors did impact negatively on our overall experience, for sure. As per usual, the ticket office staff were friendly and welcoming and offered us the information we needed to get to the site easily. We only saw one volunteer during our couple of hours on the site. And while we waited for a while to talk with her, there was already a queue.
Because we're already English Heritage members, we didn't have to pay the usual entrance fee, making it value for money. If you're not a member, you'll have to pay around about £20 for an adult, which is usual for sites of this kind in England.
The final point on the star, did it deliver what was expected? Yes and no. So a transparent half gold here too. It definitely delivered on the spectacular views and scenery, but not so much on the vibe or the engagement in history or culture.
No, it didn't match the hype for me. Sustainability. English Heritage demonstrates a commitment to sustainability issues and has a number of policies and programs in action throughout their sites to ensure environmental issues are addressed. You can't access the site via public transport, and we thought it a shame that the Land Rover service that offered alternative access from the village wasn't using a more environmentally friendly means of transportation.
The environmental impact on using the site as a tourist drawcard is definitely something that needs to be carefully managed. Tintagel's dramatic cliffs and rugged coastline are vulnerable to erosion. The heavy footfall accelerates wear and tear, threatening the very landscape that tourists come to admire. English Heritage has undertaken measures to manage the impact, including the installation of protective barriers and the introduction of controlled access to certain areas. However, balancing conservation with accessibility remains an ongoing challenge.
So in the end, was it worth the hype? That's a pretty difficult one for me to answer, to be honest. I was very grateful for the opportunity to see that spectacular coastline, but I don't feel it brought me any closer to Cornwall, its people, or its history. So a bit of a lost opportunity there. It was just a lovely walk, albeit a very crowded one. How about you?
Well, I thought it was very good that English Heritage had organised a sort of like one-way system. However, I too was very disappointed by it. So it seemed the place had enough tourism already, and feel English Heritage could invest more in the lesser known sites, as I've seen them do better elsewhere.
Next, we're off to somewhere completely different to experience a walking tour with a fabulously unique twist. We visit Manchester and tour the city with Andy, our guide from Invisible Cities, a social enterprise that trains people who have experienced homelessness to become walking tour guides. Andy's tour showed us the alleyways, alehouses, and advocates of Manchester.
But Sarah managed to get women jobs. That was something what nobody else was doing. So she was a real pioneer. She was fighting for women's rights well before the suffragettes became known, and she doesn't really get any credit for it.
We learned a lot, and we'd love to share this with you. So hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell to make sure you join us there. Until then,
Happy travels, everyone!